why is it that only government workers, Commissioner, get a bailout? You know, why do you have to have a government check before Congress comes back from its recess to try to rescue your job? You know, what about Americans along Main Street who just want to go back to work, who've seen, gosh, some almost 3.5 million jobs lost along Main Street since the stimulus took effect? The only sector that's gained is the federal government. They've gotten jobs. Everyone else gets pink slips. What about the energy workers who are losing their jobs due to the drilling moratorium the President has in place today, and the small businesses that hire all the workers who supply those rigs? What about them? They're not asking for a bailout. They just want to go back to work. You've pointed out you don't know why manufacturing improvement is occurring, but other economists say that the balance of manufacturing has come from, one, restocking their inventories, about 60%, 59% of growth. The last 3 quarters came from restocking their shelves. The rest of it, the bulk of the rest of it's come from export sales to other countries, you know, none of which, you know, is created by the stimulus. And the manufacturing this week, we've lost since stimulus began 660,000 manufacturing jobs. The improvement this month, according to your numbers in manufacturing, comes mainly from autos. And according to your briefing, the majority of that is a seasonally adjusted situation where normally this time of year they're shutting plants down for retooling and maintenance. They did that earlier and had them actually operating. So even that's not as good news as we would like. So my question is, economy weakened significantly during the second quarter of this year. It's half what it was at the beginning of the year. Real GDP growth slowed to 2.4%. Last month, consumer confidence fell dramatically, the lowest it's been since February of last year. Since the housing tax credit expired, housing starts, existing new home sales are all down. Durable goods orders are down for 2 months in a row. We're all looking for positive signs, but do these weakening economic data indicate that job growth will slow and the unemployment rate will remain stubbornly high for the rest of this year? Do you see unemployment staying high through the rest of this year?
I wouldn't want to since we produce the data, I wouldn't want to speculate on what the data might show. So with respect to talking about the rest of the year, I wouldn't want to offer an opinion on that. But I can tell you that it is true that certainly the last 3 months there has been private sector job growth, but it has not been strong yet.
May I ask, the White House predicted that employment in construction, for example, would make up a major component of the total number of jobs created or saved by the stimulus. What change has occurred in the level of payroll employment in construction since the stimulus was enacted the February of last year?
We're going to have to look it up since February. I can tell you what I can tell you really quickly. We'll see if we can get the more precise number. Yeah, construction has continued to lose jobs. It's lost about this month it lost about 11,000 jobs, and I think over the last 3 months it's lost about 20,000 jobs a month. So we haven't had consistent job growth in construction lately.
Not job growth, we've actually had consistent job loss in construction.
Is that that's February of 09? Is
yes.
That right? He'll give you the number in just a minute if you want to go ahead and go on.
Let me ask, we've lost 660,000 jobs in the manufacturing sector since the stimulus took place. Retail trade, we were told if that massive stimulus was passed would be expected to see a large increase. Is that happening? Are we seeing large increases in retail trade? Because consumer confidence is very low, lowest it's been in a year.
Yeah, retail trade was not greatly changed this month. It grew about 7,000 jobs this month, and over the past 3 months we've averaged the loss of about 7,000 jobs in retail trade.
So it's consistently, like construction, losing jobs in retail trade.
Over the last few months, it has.
We were told that 90% of the jobs from the stimulus that were created or saved would be in the private sector. Is it true that the federal government's the only economic sector to experience payroll job growth since February of the stimulus last year?
Yeah, I think other than the healthcare sector, I do think the total payroll jobs have declined since February of last year.
In the private sector.
In the
federal
private sector.
jobs, government job growth, though, is the only positive at this point.
I think healthcare and the government, I think that's right, since February overall.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it.
Thank you. In terms of construction jobs that were saved due to the stimulus, as you know, a third of the stimulus went to infrastructure projects, which are construction jobs. Can you contrast the average job loss in construction in 2008 and the first half of 2009 to more recent months? And are we still losing as many construction jobs? And what would have happened if we didn't have the stimulus supporting infrastructure jobs?
Sure. The job loss through 2008 and the first half of 2009 in construction was very high. It got as high as 150,000 in a single month. So it was very, very high, and the job loss since the middle of last year has declined. Although job loss has continued, it has moderated a fair amount.
And we're still losing quite a few jobs. Mm-hmm. Okay, in the recession in the labor market, last month's hearing, you testified that coming out of recession is fairly typical to average about 100,000 private sector jobs per month. And we have another month behind us. Is the recovery in the labor market still similar to what we've seen coming out of recent recessions?
It's actually not completely out of line. The labor market at this moment, the labor market troughed in December of this year. And since then, we've averaged about 90,000 jobs a month. During the last recession, we averaged something like 120 or so thousand jobs per month over the first 7 months. Mm-hmm. And the prior recession, we actually continued to lose some private sector jobs in the first 7 months. So it's not inconsistent with other stretches past the labor market trough.
And how would you characterize the labor market today?
Well, obviously, the large job losses has ended. We do have some sectors that are losing jobs, but we have sectors that are now gaining jobs. The job growth this year there has been job growth this year. It's 630,000 jobs. Is some job growth? It just hasn't gotten strong yet, but it is job growth.
Is there anything in your data that you could call attention to as a potential pitfall in this recovery?
Yeah, I think my biggest concern would be that a lot of the strength this year has come from just a couple of months. We had 2 months there where a lot of the numbers early in the year looked up. The payroll job growth strengthened, and the labor force participation rose. But that seems to have backed off that a little bit now. So we're in a weaker spot, I think, than we were a few months ago.
Last month, I asked you about the impact of the oil spill on jobs in the Gulf region, and you mentioned that BLS is doing some tracking and that you would be able to show areas that could be affected. I truly do understand that it's difficult to determine the precise impact, as there are jobs losses relating, for example, to tourism, fishing, and other industries. Do you have anything at this point on the employment impact of the spill in the Gulf that you are able to share with the committee?
Well, what we've done, and we've actually put it up on our website, is publicly available, is at least identify the number of jobs that are on the coasts, on the coast areas, the county employment level, so you get some idea of the kinds of jobs that are potentially at risk. And we mentioned that the number of the jobs that could be affected, like commercial fishing vessels and independent contractors, are not part of the scope. They aren't payroll jobs, so they wouldn't be captured here. So we've got the levels up. It's not obvious to see a big impact. There might well be an impact there, but we don't see a real obvious impact. For example, we haven't seen any real spikes in the unemployment insurance filings, for example, like that. And from talking with our state partners a little bit in the Gulf states, one of the things that they mentioned that's helped somewhat with leisure and hospitality is that workers working on the oil spill have sort of moved into hotels and restaurants, and that's actually helped some of the leisure and hospitality numbers that normally would have gone down more because of lost tourism. So the bottom line is it's not an obvious impact that I can see there. That doesn't mean there isn't an impact there, and if somebody does a more sophisticated look, they might be able to find a little something.
Well, my time has expired.
Commissioner, you had said in your testimony that, or comments, that the unemployment rate has declined from 9.9% in April to 9.5% this month. But did you also say that's not exactly good news, that decline is because fewer Americans have simply given up looking for work? Last month it was 650,000 people who'd given up looking for work.
Right.
This month it stayed fairly stable, but jobless claims are up again last week. But the major reason for the decline are, at this point, fewer people looking for work?
That's actually correct. I'd say early in the year we had a drop in the unemployment rate. I'm sorry, a rise in the unemployment rate from around 9.7 to 9.9, and that was primarily because of people entering the labor force. So that wasn't necessarily bad news as it looked. But now we've seen an unwinding of that, where people have now left the labor force and left unemployment. So the unemployment rate going down and holding isn't necessarily good news because of that.
Yeah, that's what I see at home. I see a lot of people who are discouraged and just giving up work. We see more who will likely lose their jobs because of the drilling moratorium in the Gulf of Mexico. Very devastating, economic disaster. That one's a government-made economic disaster, unfortunately. I see consumers who are frightened by the debt, reluctant to come back shopping, and I see businesses reluctant to hire. And as a result, that seems to be reflected in your data. The consumer confidence is the lowest it's been in years, so retail sales are very anemic growth. Job creators are very impacted by the uncertainty of all these wild policies in Washington, so they're not creating jobs. The initial jobs claims again were up last week, which caught everyone by surprise. Back in May, you suggested that small and medium-sized firms were not driving economic growth like they used to. Instead, large firms were creating more private sector jobs, and of course, government was the only sector that had grown significantly. Why do you think, well, maybe just ask this, are small and medium-sized businesses hiring more, doing better now in this regard than they were in May?
Yeah, the data we have in that lags a fair amount, but the hires in small businesses actually has declined in May a little bit, and while medium and large establishments increased slightly.
I'm sorry, run that first part by me.
Sure. Hiring in small establishments declined. The hire rate declined from about 3.8% to 3.5% in May. That's our most recent data, between February and May. While with medium and large establishments, the hire rates went up a little bit. So most of that hiring that occurred that I mentioned in those 2 strong months was in medium and large establishments.
So small businesses are hiring less, medium-sized slightly more?
Yes.
At this point, good. Why is it the consumer confidence, you think, is so far down? You would think after a year of, stimulus spending, all sorts of huge government bailouts, and now more of them next week, the consumer confidence would be higher than this. What is the reason for that?
Yeah, I can't speculate on what drives that. I just know a lot of things affect consumer confidence, but as far as trying to guess as to what's caused that, I don't know.
Okay. Are there any other points about this this month's report you want to comment upon?
No, I think this report, in its way, it's pretty similar to the last 2 months. Is that we do have some job growth, but it's just not strong job growth yet.
Are you able to identify in your report why the economy has slowed by half since the beginning of the year? I mean, that is, obviously we want the recovery to go in the right direction. Right now it's actually slowing fairly significantly. What are the reasons for that?
I don't know. I can tell you that the pickup in April and May and the slowdown in the last 3 months has been fairly broad. It hasn't been in particular sectors. Construction's been a big part of that, but it's also been retail, trade, leisure, and hospitality. So there's not an obvious explanation for the slowdown. Okay.
Well, great. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner. And I think it's important to put this in perspective. When you look